Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Peace and Justice Conference this year titled, Why Should We Care for Our Common Home? On Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si. So welcome to those who are here live and continue to share in your meal and desserts. And for those who are participating live stream or will be seeing this recorded, we welcome you to the conference too. I'm very thankful to the members of the Peace and Justice Commission and the Planning Committee that put a lot of effort and time into the planning of this conference. I'd like to just recognize them. Carla Walsh, Father Jack O'Hara, Father Mike Bazan, James Crawford, Diana Snyder, Bridget Wilson, Allison Fram, Kevin Boley, Ed Glendinger. So thank you for their wonderful work of preparing for the conference. This evening, we will have our keynote address by Dan Misla, and then a panel response. We have three wonderful panelists, and then there'll be a time for question and answers with the panelists, with our bishop, and with our speaker. So in the program, you'll be able to text your questions to 703-594-7168, and that is found in the program on your tables. For those live streaming, it's 703-594-7168. And you'll be able to text your questions so we can share them with the panelists. It is a great joy for me to introduce our keynote speaker now. Dan Misla has been involved in social mission of the church since 1982, when he began 2 years of Jesuit Volunteer Corps ministry in Alaska. And as they say about that program, join the JVC and it will ruin your life. Ruin your life with a zeal for social justice. Yeah. So Dan was embraced by that. His current role is a founder of Catholic Climate Covenant, a partnership of 18 national Catholic organizations in our country, including the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Prior to this role, he guided the organization as its first executive director. His leadership helped engage the Catholic community at a national, state, and diocesan level in a serious and sustained conversion about Catholic approach to climate change, focusing on the promotion of the common good, the protection of the poor, and the exercise of prudence, with the goal of more fully implementing Catholic teaching. Under his leadership, the Covenant has launched Catholic Energies, a program designed to help Catholic facilities realize significant savings through smart energy efficiency and renewable energy technology. So we use Catholic Energies here at Nativity to install solar panels on our church and school roof. Prior to becoming the founder and director of Catholic Climate Covenant, Dan served the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, first as a policy advisor and then the director of diocesan relations for the Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development. He did that for 11 years, 1995 to 2006. He has trained Catholic leaders around the country in the principle of Catholic social teaching, parish social ministry, community organizing, and the Catholic approach to issues such as the environment, criminal justice, the death penalty, and agriculture. Dan graduated with a degree in business management from Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, and holds a master's degree in theology from the Franciscan School of Theology in California. Dan is the 2015 recipient of the Harry A. Fagan Award by the Roundtable Association of Social Action Directors for his unique contributions made to the achievement of the Catholic vision of social justice in the national and international community. Dan and his wife, Susan, live in Cheverly, Maryland with their 3 children. It's a delight to have Dan with us tonight. Please welcome Dan Misla.
All right. Thank you very much, Father Bob. Thank you, Bishop Burbidge, the organizers of this conference. And thank you for coming out on a Saturday night. Wow. I'm not sure I would do it, but I'm only doing it because I was told to do it. So let me get this set up. Give me just a second. Yep. So let's see. These slides. There we go. Okay, bottom one. I'm going to follow along on my screen here. Give me just a minute. Sorry. Okay, I think we're ready. So again, thank you for the invitation to speak to you tonight. I know at least tonight there's no snow. I think this was supposed to be last March and got canceled, so thanks for having me back. So Catholic Climate Covenant is an organization, as you heard in the bio, that was founded in 2006. We are working to try to help the Catholic community understand and act on the issue of climate change. As you can see, we have a network of 20 Catholic partners. We added a few more since the introduction. We do advocacy, organizing, and education, and we want to share authentic Catholic teaching on the issue of climate change and build a network for action. So the way we, I just want to make sure, let's see. All right, so what we're talking about is saving planet Earth from our own activities. Our Earth is under threat, and we need to step up and begin to understand and realize that this is something that we need to protect, the good Earth that God has given to us to be co-creators. So what we're going to do tonight is, I'll get these buttons down in a minute. Okay, so we're going to use the pastoral circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to first name the experience, what is happening, look at the wider information and implications, what is happening. We're going to examine where God is in this and what does it mean, and we're going to talk about how we can bring some change. How shall we respond? So, okay. There we go. So what is our experience? So we know that the last 19 of the hottest years on record, since records have been kept, have occurred since 2002. And of those, sorry, get my slides coordinated here. Most of those have been in the last 7 years. So every year is getting just a little bit warmer than the previous year. We also know that most of that extra heat goes into the ocean. 93% of that extra heat is absorbed by the ocean, which is trapping these man-made global warming pollution, the gases, greenhouse gases. And the result of that is that our waters are now, this is going to, there we go. So the waters are now becoming a lot warmer. And the latest example of that, or there's been more recent ones, but last year the path of Hurricane Ida went over the Gulf, and those temperatures were 4 degrees Celsius or 7 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than usual, which is fuel to a hurricane, and that's why it was such a devastating hurricane. As the temperatures increase in the oceans, more water evaporates and more moisture is in the sky, and so we have bigger events, bigger floods, more rain events, and those types of things. And we have what happens in Texas and other places, we have rain bombs. And here's a picture of one in Midland, Texas, where these massive downpours happen. And it's really frightening, and it causes a lot of flash flooding and a lot of death. And of course, that's not just in the United States, that's also around the world. And here's one image of this town in Germany that had one of these rain bombs hit them before and after. Nope, wait a minute, back up. Well, you saw it, I think. But this is a picture of Ellicott City, not too far from here, up by Baltimore. This was the second massive flooding event that they had in 2 years. This one was in 2018. They had one similar in 2016. So you can just see how this rain comes down several inches in an hour and creates a situation like this. So more and more of this is happening. I'm going to continue because I know we're going to be short on time. The same extra heat that evaporates more water from the ocean is causing bigger downpours and floods, but it's also causing more droughts. So the rule of thumb with climate change is that wet areas are getting wetter and dry areas are getting drier. So the same heat that evaporates a lot of water and creates storms also evaporates a lot of water and causes droughts. And we know that as droughts, as the heat rises, there's a more prevalence for wildfires. And we've seen this particularly in the West. In California, New Mexico had a massive wildfire this past year. This Greenville, California fire was one of the largest in history, the second largest in California's history, and it's destroyed most of that town. And over the years, we've seen pictures like this again and again. This extra heat is also melting glaciers. The warmer temperatures are melting these glaciers around the world. Come on, glacier. And Greenland's ice sheet is now melting 4 times faster than what they had predicted. And all of that water is going into the oceans, raising sea levels. If Greenland continues in this melting this way, by the end of the century, that's going to add another meter or almost 4 feet of sea level rise. So when we do that, this is what happens. So these are the top 10 cities at risk from sea level rise by population. So you can see a lot of them are in the South Asia, Southeast Asia. And if we look at it in terms of assets, you know, where are our most expensive places and what's sea level rise going to do to them, you can see that the Newark area is one area that's going to be hit pretty hard, as well as Miami and some other places like that. Who's paying attention to this? Well, the insurance companies are certainly paying attention to this. So this is a chart from Munich Re. This is the insurance company that insures the insurers. And they're seeing again and again, they're having to pay out all these insurance payments for natural disasters. Some of them, of course, are natural. Some of them are natural but human forced because of climate change. So they certainly are paying attention to these extreme weathers. And on this chart, you can see that more of these droughts and fires, floods and mudslides and storms are happening, and that's increasing year over year. The U.S. Department of Defense says that climate change will likely lead to food and water shortages, pandemic disease, disputes over refugees and resources, and destruction by natural disasters in regions across the globe. So this is why climate change is often called a threat multiplier. A lot of these places are already suffering from conflicts, from droughts and floods and things like that as a natural course of events, but because of climate change and because of environmental degradation, it's increasing that, and it's causing more and more refugees like the ones we see on our southern border and around the world. There are now more from September 2020. So what is this going to mean for, oh, sorry, I'm back. There, that's the vector-borne illness chart that I didn't switch to. Come on. So in Virginia, what are the impacts going to be like in Virginia? So what is predicted, as you can see from these charts, is that, so for example, mosquito season is now 22 days longer than it was just a few years ago. The days are going to get hotter and more humid, and there's going to be more heavy downpours, and you can see that from the chart. It just continues to increase. So things like was witnessed in Ellicott City, and I'm sure you've seen some of these big storms here in Virginia, that's going to be happening more and more. The other thing that, let me go back, sorry. So the other thing I think that's really sad is that scientists are now predicting that we could lose up to half of all land-based species in this century. These are also God's creatures, and so is it right for us to be destroying all of this creation because of our own neglect and inability to come to grips with what's happening? So why is this happening? What are the wider implications, and what are some of the things that we know? So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about this thin layer of atmosphere. This is taken from I think the space station. As this thin layer of atmosphere helps to keep the Earth a Goldilocks planet, not too hot, not too cold, just right. And that's been happening for about 10,000 years or more. But what we're doing is when the sun, and this is just kind of basic climate science, many of you probably know this, the sun beats down on the Earth, heats the Earth up, that atmosphere re-radiates some of the heat that's trying to escape and keeps the planet up before then. But this is an article from Popular Mechanics magazine in March 1912, where they say that the furnaces of the world that are burning all this coal are going to continue to put CO2 into the atmosphere. This is nothing new, folks, but now we're just accelerating it. So let's go a little bit deeper. And for people of faith, we need to have an anthropology gave rise to a wrong understanding of the relationship between human beings and the world. When we fail to acknowledge as part of that reality the worth of a poor person, a human embryo, a person with disabilities, to offer just a few examples, it becomes difficult to hear the cry of nature itself. Everything is connected. So our relationship with the environment can never be isolated, Pope Francis continues, with others and with God. Otherwise, it would be nothing more than romantic individualism dressed up in ecological garb, locking us into a stifling immanence. So I think faith people, we need to see both the spiritual and the social responsibility for what is happening. Well, in short, I keep skipping through slides. This quote is actually from Pope Benedict XVI, but it was read by Pope Francis at Pope Francis's in the encyclical. But this was Benedict XVI's first Mass as our new pontiff. He said this: "The external deserts in the world are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast." So Pope Francis puts that into the encyclical, and Pope Francis continues in the encyclical after this. He says, "For this reason, the ecological crisis is also a summons to profound interior conversion." So what happens in our parishes and schools and in the practice of our faith, the sacraments, marriage support, youth development, religious education, and so forth, is as important as addressing care of creation, because the social and cultural impact, the ecological and environment, because of the social and cultural impact, the ecological and environment, and vice versa. Again, in the encyclical we hear again and again, all of this is connected. So what does this mean, and where is God in this? Okay, so let's get a little bit deeper and maybe a little bit heavy. So let's begin at the beginning. I believe that without a profound change, or rather fully embracing original teaching that was dramatically distorted with the dawn of the Enlightenment and scientific discoveries, we will not be able to save ourselves or the rest of God's creation from our own foolishness. So let's reframe where the human person is. It fits into this place, this earth, this universe. Our human experience seems to begin with, well, our human experience. But if we look to history, we tend only to go back as far as our history, human history. But there was so much more before human history. If we compressed all of time from the Great Flaring Forth, or the Big Bang, if you will, 13.77 billion years ago, if we compress all of that into a 24-hour clock, human beings arrive at 4 seconds to midnight. So was there nothing that happened before then? As Christians, we often think that our faith began 2,000 years ago, and that's true with the incarnation of Christ as Jesus, or maybe Genesis or in the Hebrew scriptures. But did God not speak before? Genesis gives us our origin story, where God, speaking in the first person plural, called all creation good, and humankind, the pinnacle of creation, very good. In John's gospel, it's clear that he says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through him, and without him nothing came to be. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." All right, well, that was John being poetic, right? So we can forgive John for being a little bit, for using a flourish. But every Sunday, just tonight, we said this: we believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all that is seen and unseen. We believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the only Son of God, eternally begotten of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, one in being with the Father. Let's go a little bit deeper. So the universe cooled about 380,000 years after the great flaring forth. The most abundant elements at that time in the universe began to form: hydrogen and helium. Nearly all the hydrogen that currently exists came from this time. By atomic weight, our bodies contain about 10% hydrogen, much of this as part of the water molecule. So at our very core, we are made of the stuff of the universe. So if you're feeling a little worn down today, that's probably that 10% hydrogen that's got some miles on it. The Passionist priest and theologian Thomas Berry and others have said of this reality and of the human condition, we are the universe become conscious of itself. Isn't that a cool thought? We, made of the stuff of the universe, from God, have become conscious, have become the conscious of the universe. We are conscious that we exist. Taken further, the realization from the beginning that God has created us and we are made of stardust, and that these early elements exist throughout the universe and all creatures on earth, can we begin to say that we, as part of creation and with all of creation, are a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. We are a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. Barry notes as well the powerful reality of sacraments, which are also embody the elements of nature and the liturgical cycle, wheat and grapes for the body and blood of Christ, and they reflect great seasonal movements of the earth. Christmas comes, at least in the northern hemisphere, just after the darkest day of the year, and Easter comes in the spring when new life is flourishing throughout the northern hemisphere. It remains absolutely true that humans are, in fact, made in God's image and likeness, but we must also recall that all of creation gives praise to the God and inspire even the rivers and trees to clap their hands, as the psalmist tells us. But we also know this, and Bishop Burbage mentioned this in his homily as well. Come on. Pope Francis says the gravest effects of all attacks on the environment are suffered by the poorest. That's why we are also concerned. We're concerned about creation, but we are also concerned about people, particularly those who don't have what we have. We've known this for some time in Catholic social teaching and our witness through Catholic charities organizations, Catholic relief services, and the like. It's the poor who are hurt the most. For those of us with insurance, financial resources, and other support systems, we will be suffering inconvenience because of climate change. For the poor, think renters in the US, who have few resources, no savings, unreliable transportation. What little they have could be gone in a day. For subsistence farmers in Africa, in India, and other places around the world, climate change is a matter of life and death. So how do we respond? How do we bring change? In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis warns us to guard against a kind of lazy search for truth and to be led as sheep by those whose goals are power and glory. We must instead, he continues, work to find truth and recognize that there are universal values that come from that truth and are derived from natural law. So, for example, it is universally recognized that one nation should not invade another nation without a just cause. It is undeniably true that Afghani, Ukrainian, Filipino, or Colombian parents love their children just as much as North Americans love their children. It's a fact that from the moment of human conception, the being is a human one. It is also true that a murderer is not defined by his or her worst act, and sentencing them to death is not reflective of Christian values. I contend that if we stop, quiet ourselves, our minds and our bodies, and listen to our hearts, that is to God, we can only come to these same conclusions. Does that move our hearts? We have all the teaching we need. We've got popes, we've got Genesis, we've got the Gospels. We've got statements from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, one in 1991 and one in 2001. We have what we need. We have all the tools that we need in the Catholic Church. What we need is a movement. And if we look back on times when history was at a turning point, movements were founded. So, for example, St. Francis taught us how to live simply and appreciate the goodness of all creation and seek peace. The Daughters of Charity, formed in response to the good work of St. Vincent de Paul, were formed from the good works of St. Vincent de Paul. St. Benedict provided a comprehensive framework for monastic life. Today's Focolare movement seeks to build a more unified world focused on the respect for the diversity of the human experience. The Catholic Worker movement seeks a revolution of the heart by living with and serving the lost, the lonely, and the forgotten. What movement does the climate crisis call us to? Well, fortunately for us, there are at least two organizations that I know of, and there's probably more, that are working on this. One is the organization in the United States called Catholic Climate Covenant that I'm privileged to serve with. The other is the Laudato Si movement, which does what we do, but they do it globally. So we have what we need. We just need to get busy. So let's go from the spiritual to the practical. So it's great that we have the internal motivation, but how do we do this? So let's talk a little bit about that. Pope Francis, in his encyclical, says there is an urgent need to develop policies so that in the next few years, the emission of carbon dioxide and other highly polluting gases can be drastically reduced. For example, substituting for fossil fuels and developing sources of renewable energy. So just a few years ago, in 2000, the global wind capacity was projected to be about 30 gigawatts of power by 2010. That has been exceeded by that goal has been exceeded by a factor of 25 just 2 years ago. The U.S. wind energy capacity has risen exponentially over the years, and that continues to continues to rise. There's enough wind energy around the globe to supply the world's electricity needs 40 times over. The same is true with solar. As costs have come down and as it's become competitive with other forms of energy, solar has now taken off. Nativity has its solar array on its school. Many of you may have it on your home, so congratulations to you. This is what the Chilean solar market looks like, the country. Oh, I guess I got to hit the right slide. Sorry about that. So after a slow start, look at what they have under construction right now and approved for construction to begin. This is amazing. What if we could do that in the United States? Wouldn't that be something? There is enough solar energy reaching the Earth every hour to fill all the world's energy needs for a full year. Why can't we do that? Well, electric vehicles, the car makers are beginning to think about that. So this electric vehicles will reach price parity this year in the United States, Australia, and Europe for large cars, and in the United States and Australia for SUVs. Come on. Now, there we go. So it's happening. You know, there's this price parity going on. Sorry about the slide confusion. So in a relatively short time, we're going to have a lot more electric cars. General Motors has announced that they're not going to produce any more internal combustion engine cars, diesel or gasoline, by 2035. The global electric cars on the road continues to accelerate. You're seeing more and more electric vehicles, both in Europe and in the United States and in many other countries as well. What also gives me hope is what young people are doing. They're out there saying, this is my future. Let's get serious about this, folks. So all of us who were gray-haired or no hair, as the case may be, we have a responsibility to these next generations. And this isn't just happening in developed countries, but in developing countries as well. So let me turn quickly to some of the programs that Catholic Climate Covenant offers. Here we go. So the first thing I hope you do is check out our website. We were just talking about the priest on the top of this building, Father John Grace. He's a little south of you down in Hampton Roads, or Hampton, Virginia. His parish was the first Catholic Energy solar array. And he is so happy with his solar program that we helped him develop. But that's just one piece on our website. You can find all kinds of resources on Catholic Climate Covenant's website. I urge you to take a look, click through the tabs, just see all the amazing things that our staff does to provide for all of you. We have a creation care team. How many parishes have a creation care team? We got a few. All of you know Paz then, right, on our staff? So Paz runs our creation care team program. We have about 500 creation care teams around the country. This is just a sample from San Diego. And you know, all of you are doing amazing things with your creation care team. We really try to resource those, give you ideas, talk you through. We have a toolkit. How do you get more people involved? How do you talk to your pastor about this? How do you, you know, if you have an hour, what can you do? If you only have 10 minutes, here's something you could try. If you have a whole day, try this program. So we try to resource our creation care teams quite thoroughly. We also have the last couple of years, and we're going to do another one this summer, a program that we're calling the Laudato Si and the U.S. Catholic Church. We're doing that in collaboration with Creighton University, and it's really to try to get Laudato Si embedded into the ministries of the Catholic Church. Everything from preaching to education to creation care teams, environmental justice, youth and young adults, and so forth. So it's a program that we've committed three of these conferences, and we'll see what happens after next summer. But they have been really important parts of what we do. Out of one of these conferences came our young adult ministry program, our mobilization program, that is just really going to take off. We've got a lot of great ideas that we're trying to develop now. We're hiring someone. The first director of that left us, unfortunately, so we're hiring for a new staff person, but pay attention to that. That's going to be really exciting. And I really think we need to channel the young people's energy to this work. Every year we produce a Earth Day program and a Feast of St. Francis program. These are the two most recent Earth Day programs, and our Feast of St. Francis program this year is on eco-spirituality. These are out-of-the-box programs. You download it from our website. It gives you the script. It tells you the materials you'll need. It's designed for small groups, perfect for creation care teams or a parish setting, and it's very simple to go through that. We often do some prayer, a video, reflection on that video, and actions. Sometimes those actions are just doing things. Other times the actions are advocacy. What can we do with our policymakers to encourage them to embrace this a little bit more? We also are the, see if I can go back. The Vatican and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops have asked the Covenant to be the hub of activity for the Laudato Si Action platform. The Diocese of Arlington has a plan in the works, and we're very pleased to hear that. Several other dioceses are doing the platform, but it's really a way for these 7 sectors, if you will, families, parishes, dioceses, religious communities, universities, healthcare, and businesses and farms, to do 7 goals, which are on the left side of the screen, I believe, over a period of 7 years. So 7's a great Catholic number, right? 7 sacraments and so forth. But so 7 sectors, 7 years, 7 goals. And the idea is it's a framework. How do we implement Laudato Si more completely in our institutions? And so we're trying to help animate that. The Vatican website is called the Laudato Si Action Platform.org. We have an accompanying website just in the United States called godsplanet.us. There's some flyers for that out at the registration table. Please take one of those and you can take a look at what's happening in the United States around the platform in all of the sectors and with all of the goals. The other thing that was mentioned is our Catholic Energies program. We are very proud of this program because it's a very concrete way for Catholic facilities to reduce their energy use by adopting solar and energy efficiency projects. So this, there we go. This is a video in the middle of this screen, but that's a project that we did for Catholic Charities for the Archdiocese of Washington. So just listen to this project for a minute. 5,072 panels on a field that Catholic Charities owns. The building in that picture that you can see in the top left is Mother Teresa's nuns doing hospice work for indigent adults. That building has a lot of deferred maintenance. That field was empty except for a couple of trees that we had to take down. It produces 2 megawatts, 2 megawatts of power. It's eliminating 3,400 tons of CO2 every year. It's offsetting nearly 100% of the conventional electricity for all of the buildings that Catholic Charities owns in the District of Columbia. It's equivalent to powering 350 homes a year. It's 2.5% of all renewable energy generated in the District of Columbia. And in between those panels, we've sown pollinator plants, which help keep the panels cooler and provides a study center for urban pollinators. Tell me what's not to like about that. There's a company that owns this, saves Catholic Charities $250,000 a year on their electric bill, money that can be used for more counselors, more food for hungry people, and so forth. And because it's owned by someone else, they have to pay for the Diocese of Richmond for commercial and industrial solar project of the year. We've done, I think, about 8 or 10 projects in the Diocese of Richmond. So you have some catching up to do. We also, as don't go anywhere. Catholic Climate Covenant also has, as I mentioned earlier, an advocacy component. Throughout this past spring and summer, over 800 Catholics from 48 states met with their senators to urge them to act on climate change. apparently we were successful because we had the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest climate bill ever passed by Congress and is going to have an enormously positive impact on the things that we hold dear. So let me begin to wrap this up. One of my favorite poets is John O'Donohue, and in his book, Walking in Wonder, he says this: when we come into the eternal world, we won't so much be checked for our failure. Wonder, the beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered. It heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled and you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Pope Francis says much the same thing in his encyclical. He says many things have to change course, but it is we human beings above all, who need to change. We lack an awareness of our common origin, of our mutual belonging, and a future to be shared with everyone. This basic awareness would enable the development of new convictions, attitudes, and forms of life. A great cultural, spiritual, and educational challenge stands before us, and it will demand that we set out on the long path of renewal. So let's work on that together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan, for your very insightful and updating keynote address that was filled with a tone of urgency and hope for us. Now I'd like to invite Bridget Wilson, who is the director of the Multicultural Office of our diocese, to come forward to introduce our panelists who will respond to Dan's keynote address.
Hello, good evening. It is my honor and privilege to announce our panelists tonight, and I invite them up to the stage. First, we have Megan Goodwin, Associate Director of Government Relations for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. We have Linnell Battle, Assistant Principal and Dean of Academics at Bishop Ireton High School. And finally, we have Andrew Shulman, Director of the Diocesan Office of Planning, Construction, and Facilities. And once again, a reminder to please use the number in your program to text your questions that you might think of during our panelist presentations. Thank you so much.
Check one. Can you hear me? Excellent. Good evening. I'm Andy Shulman. I work for the Diocese of Arlington. I'm the Director of Planning and Construction for the Bishop. We have a lot of infrastructure across Northern Virginia, 70 parishes, high schools, schools, and other diocese properties. And so I wanted to take just a couple minutes of your time to talk about who we are, what we do, and then potentially answer any questions in response to Dan's presentation. Is somebody clicking for us? Can you click? Next slide. Yeah. So we provide real property management, design management, construction management, and I'm pleased to say that I am a busy architect around Northern Virginia on your behalf. We are overwhelmed with the generosity of parishioners, the excitement of high schools, improvement of high schools, and a lot of energy projects that I wanted to talk to you a bit about tonight. There's our mission, and there's part of my team up there. Next slide, please. Our main goal is to use technology to make our buildings smarter, more efficient, less reliant on the brown power grid, so to speak. The way we're doing that is, regretfully, a lot of these churches and schools that were built 40, 50 years ago have not been maintained that well. So they have absolute pigs of HVAC systems, lighting systems, roofs that are failing, etc., windows that are leaking. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit with respect to HVAC, lighting, indoor air quality, daylighting, water conservation, etc. The way we do that is we go to the pastor or we go to the principal of the school and say, let us help you build a baseline of your energy use today. And then we'll start jiggering with your building and try to reduce your costs. And from that, we can usually get you some sort of operational savings by making improvements to your facilities. And after we do that, the high school takes that money and invests it in our kids. Thank you. Next slide. As Dan mentioned, we've got a couple Catholic Energies projects completed already, 3 parishes, and there is the 4th at Our Lady Queen of Peace, which was privately funded. We're close to 1 megawatt thus far, to include this parish here in Nativity, St. Anthony's, and St. Bernadette's. We've got 7 megawatts on the way. There's a lot coming. A lot of roofs to cover, a lot of parishes that are working very hard to qualify for these programs. The way it works is, like Dan said, we don't want to own or operate these solar panels. We want the contractor to own them. They come to Father Bob's roof, they put their system in, they are incentivized to make sure that those panels are generating a lot of juice. And so the parish makes a pre-agreed upon payment for the electricity that's generated on their roof, but we don't own, operate, or maintain those panels. And at the end of the lease period, the contractor can either come take those panels back or we own them at that point. And so it's a pretty exciting program. And the pastor just wants to be a pastor and not think about those solar panels on the roof. But we make sure that our partners, and thus far Catholic Energies has been a great partner, deliver a great system for each of the parishes. Quick picture of Nativity in your upper left. Oh, excuse me, I'm upside down, aren't I? That's St. Bernadette's upper left, lower left, Nativity, and that's Our Lady Queen of Peace on the upper right. And then last slide. Real briefly, as an architect, we look at buildings as a system. So when we have an opportunity to both build new construction or modify an existing facility, we push our architects and engineers to deliver the latest technology, the most efficient systems, the best life cycle solution for that property. So even though it may cost a little bit more on the day of construction, over the life cycle of that building, 40, 50, 60 years from now, hopefully your parish or your school is saving dollars. I wanted to show you Paul VI's brand new facility in Loudon, up in upper left. It is an incredibly efficient building. Not just because we wanted to. In many cases, the municipalities make efficient buildings, but the architects went above and beyond to deliver bright, light spaces, efficient systems. It is a world-class campus if you ever get the chance to see the new PVI. Bishop Byerton, Bishop O'Connell, and John Paul the Great are also fantastic facilities that are very bright, very welcoming, and very efficient for our kids. And the last thing, we talked about footprint of our facilities. We have a lot of older buildings that are being poorly utilized. And the lower side part of this slide is Sacred Heart of Jesus in Winchester, Virginia. They had a defunct, dilapidated convent that was being used for storage. And the pastor had a vision to restore it, and what you see on the lower right is a newly restored building that now has their parish offices in it. And so rather than tear that building down, which has a lot of imbued carbon in it already, he came up with a better use for it. We avoided putting all that construction in a landfill, and the parish is happy to have a new facility. So again, real quick wave tops. I defer to the rest of the panel, and happy to answer any questions you may have about what we're doing. Thank you.
So my name is Megan Goodwin, and as they said when they introduced me, I'm Associate Director of Government Relations for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And in my professional capacity, I'm the lead lobbyist for the bishops on issues related to domestic anti-poverty work, foreign policy, and environmental justice. And so I'm very grateful for Dan and the Catholic Climate Covenant's continued work and collaboration in that regard. I was invited to come here today to speak about what this looks like in terms of family. So I am also a wife and mother. I have 3 children. They are 6, 3, and 1. I saw them run past the door here on their way out to the playground with my husband right before I came up. So my husband was a member of this parish from his childhood, Ross Goodwin, member of Church of Nativity all the way through young adulthood, and played the violin. So it's good to be here. So in terms of what this looks like in our family, Care for Creation, I would put it in 3 buckets. The first is, as a parent, you're the first catechist of your child. And so you have that explicit faith formation. And that looks like for us prayers before meals, prayers before bedtime, reading scripture from her children's Bible before she goes to sleep. And then, of course, she goes to St. James Catholic School up in Falls Church and gets that Catholic education. And in the context of that formation, we also work in the social teaching of the church and thinking about what life is like, not just for those in our immediate community, our neighbors down the street, but also those who are on the margins, those who we might not see every day, and those who are impoverished around the world. And thinking about, how do our actions in our daily lives relate or impact those who we don't immediately see, because our tendency is to think about what's in front of us, think about what's immediate. As Dan mentioned in his talk, that there's a tendency towards a stifling imminence. I liked that phrase, it stuck with me, where you're just concerned with what's right in front of you on a given day, but to make space for that transcendence and thinking about the divine plan and thinking about our neighbors around the world. The second category would be just small acts within the family that overall might not make a huge impact on our carbon footprint, but are very valuable in terms of formation of our children. And so that looks like we have a family garden in the backyard. We have a statue of the Holy Family in the middle of the garden. I invite my daughter out there in the spring to plant the flowers and plant our vegetables. She loves harvesting our tomatoes. She gets a total kick out of finding the tomatoes. And so trying to grow as much food locally and in our backyard as we can. We also keep quail for eggs, so we go out every day and feed the quail and collect their eggs and eat them on our Saturday morning breakfasts. And so having, and that the value of that is having our children think about, where does our food come from? Our food doesn't just come from a box in a grocery store. Our food comes from the earth. And so what happens to the earth happens to the creatures of the earth, including those sources of our food. We also emphasize walking and biking as family activities. On Saturdays, we might walk to the farmer's market. But then a third category, which are thinking about what actually reduces our carbon footprint as our family the most significantly. And that boils down to 2 things. It's how we eat and how we travel. A number one, as Dan mentioned in his presentation, a number one contributor to climate change are carbon emissions. And about half of those carbon emissions come from our cars. that we drive, and then another 15% or so comes from the agricultural industry. So the mega farms that are the source of a lot of our meat and dairy in our country. And so, when I was fresh out of graduate school, I was looking for a car that was high efficiency, and at the time I was priced out of hybrids, but just looking at miles per gallon, what's a car that I can get within a particular budget that is fuel efficient. And now we have a hybrid van, but then more so just cutting down on how often we drive, walking them to school when you can, using that opportunity to talk with your kids about what they learned that day at school, what they're looking forward to, or what they talked about that day, and then commenting on the flowers, on the butterflies, on how wonderful it is to have trails that we can walk on for public use. And so how we travel is one big area that's good for formation, but in terms of how we as individual Catholics can make a difference, that's one big way. And the second, in terms of how we eat, we know that meat, for example, the eating red meat in particular, the raising of cows uses an enormous amount of water. It releases a lot of methane. There's an eradication of vegetation on the grazing lands. And just simply cutting back the amount of meat that we eat also fits into our Catholic framework, So we started out doing meatless Fridays, and then that expanded to meatless Mondays. And at this point, probably 3 days a week, hard and fast, we don't do any meat, and we'll do fish. And we use this to think about people across the world who don't have the privilege of eating meat very often and live frankly on rice and beans in many places in the world. So it's an act of solidarity, but it also has a large impact. So we focus on whole grains, less processed foods, and then because we don't buy meat very often, that saves us a lot of money, especially now with inflation and how much it costs to go to the grocery store and buy some meat. And so we take those savings and we use it to buy our vegetables and fruits organic, locally made if possible. We might walk to the farmer's market, making and talking about how are the animals treated. So if we buy some eggs at the grocery store, how were the chickens treated? Were they able to, wander in the fields, or were they crammed into a warehouse in cages and could never saw the light of day? Because we as Catholics are given stewardship over creation. We were given dominion over the created world, not domination. We're not meant to be tyrants. We're meant to be stewards. And so it is our responsibility to care for the earth and to think about how we really are connected. As Catholics, we worship the Son of God in the Eucharist. And the Eucharist itself, it's a symbol of the incarnation, how we are incarnational beings. We are fully human beings. Jesus Christ was fully God and fully man. And what that means is that our bodies are part of who we are, and our bodies are also part of the created world. What we eat, the world we walk through, the air we breathe, all of it is part of who we are because we are incarnational beings. And so taking care of one another, seeing God in our neighbors, thinking about how our choices that we make every day, our small choices, affect those around the world, are all ways that we try to live out the call to care for creation in our family.
Good evening. My name is Linnell Battle, and I'm the assistant principal for academics at Bishop Ireton High School. And I want to talk about some of the ways that environmental issues are being addressed in the classrooms, in the curriculum. When Carla asked me to do this, I was trying to figure out where to begin, and so what I did was an inventory asking our teachers, how are you doing this already? What are you teaching? What are our students learning that will make them more aware? We've really thought that raising awareness among the students was important. I am curious in the audience, how many of you have children currently in school? All right, and how many of you have grandchildren who are in school? Great, great, I do. So what I would offer is raising awareness among them, because I will say at the high school level, this is on their minds. And we can empower them to learn more about the truth of what is happening and why we need to protect the earth and why it is a gift from our Creator. So I want to tell you about some of the things I've found, because I think by doing an inventory of what's already happening, we can build on that. But we kind of have to figure out where we are to begin. So I was pleasantly surprised in our high school curriculum. I'm going to start with a course that's an elective. Students choose to take it, but we offer AP Human Geography. I think there are a lot of courses out there now that did not exist when I was in high school, and maybe some of you were in high school. But this course, which is taught on a college level, it's an advanced placement class, it looks at the concepts of sustained urban growth. Very much this system talks about water. And one point that's been made several times this evening is that the need for water, we get water. We can assume, even when we have to buy bottled water, we think that's such a hardship. So many people in this world do not have access to clean water. And that is something that our students are going to be the ones to solve and to provide for that. And so we need to make them aware of just how fortunate we are and how they can help others. So, all right, we'll move on from that course. I could talk about the course all night. Our seniors have a choice in religion and theology class. Everybody takes theology of the body, but then they have a choice among some courses for the second semester, and one of those courses is Catholic social teachings. And in that course, they learn about the dignity of the human person, subsidiarity and solidarity, as well as they explore the dignity of work and the rights of workers, and the role of government and political authority in areas such as poverty, wealth and economic initiative, war and peace, and the stewardship of the environment. Now, pre-COVID, this class was able to go on field trips to a place I have not visited, but I would very much like to go. I don't know if you've heard of Whiffle Tree Farm in Warrenton, Virginia? Yes? Okay, good. It's run by two Catholic men who live out their the church's social teachings in farming. They care for the earth in the way that they farm. They do not use harsh chemicals or pesticides. They care for the animals and treat them well. There are no hormones or antibiotics there. Their cattle are 100% grass-fed. And in the dignity of work, when the students go on the field trip, they see how all this is done. And they also see how a farmer uses his whole person, his body, his mind, and his spirit, in cooperating with nature and facing the challenges to produce food. They really do raise this awareness, like you were doing, of how did that food get on my table? And see all the steps that takes. Perhaps one of the things that's raised our awareness and our appreciation for that, that's one of there have been some positive impacts of the last several years and the epidemic, is that we are raising awareness about things of that nature. Next, I'm moving to the English department, and we have an Honors Media and Arts for Peace elective. This is a fascinating class that came to our school a number of years ago from Georgetown University, actually, asked us to pilot it on the high school level. In this class, the students completed a forecasting exercise to articulate as specifically as they could the steps that they as individuals and the class and the school could take to curb our carbon footprint. And many of the students indicated at the end of this course that they had immediately, as individuals, implemented some of their near-term strategies. So that was very rewarding for the teacher to see them actually put it into action and move forward with it. Another recently new course, this is our 4th year offering environmental science. And this is a core curriculum class. Our students take biology, chemistry, physics, and their 4th year, they have a choice of what they might take in the sciences. And we are now offering environmental science. Obviously, this is very on topic here tonight. And they do look at environmental health, water resources again, atmosphere, global climate change, non-renewable energies, renewable energy alternatives, and waste management in that curriculum. They also tie in current events and see how, they're not just learning facts, but they see how this is playing out on a global issue, on a global scale, and through current events. Let's see, I can keep on going. We also have a broadcasting elective, and a requirement in that course is to create a public service announcement about an environmental issue. And that is one of their favorite, I'm told by the teacher, that is one of their favorite assignments throughout the course. And again, just that idea of raising awareness. And we do a broadcasting show so those announcements can be played. We also now at Bishop Ireton have a scholars program which requires students to do independent study their sophomore, junior, and senior year. And they are charged with picking a topic of particular interest and pursuing that through academic research, as well as an internship or a project outside the school walls, and doing a presentation in their senior year. So we're in our 2nd year of the pilot group going through this program. We're very excited about it. Current interests do include environmental issues, and I'm hoping that that will grow as a topic of pursuit among the scholars program. But right now we have one student who's researching improving charging stations for accessibility to them for electric cars. Another one, this one blew me away when I saw it, curbing the growing amount of what is called space junk. We're littering outer space, and that is going to have ramifications in the long run, possibly. So that is something that one of our students is pursuing. And one student is pursuing environmental triggers of asthma. So a direct impact of how the environment impacts human beings through health issues. So we also, I'm told, I haven't seen it done yet, but evidently we have the equipment for conducting a science lab with solar panels and measuring angles and things, how efficient they can be, how to more efficiently use them, I believe. Is that right? Okay, maybe you can help us with that. So that's something I want to see happen. And one of our physics teachers, she talks about climate control in her class, and she has specifically brought Laudato Si into her curriculum, feeling that it is important, and this is a wonderful way. What we're always trying to do is bring faith into all our curriculum and all aspects. And so she uses Laudato Si to bring faith into her curriculum, are very often the ones that contributed the least to producing the problems. So that is something that we are also making our students aware of. Other ways that the students have experienced this are through Model UN. I want to turn now to some of our clubs and activities. So the Model UN program now, very often the topics on a global scale that the students are addressing and debating are environmental in nature. We have a Charity for Medicine club, and they had a project last year that I thought was brilliant. They worked with a nonprofit. I don't know, has anyone ever heard of SOLES, S-O-L-E-S, for Souls, S-O-U-L-S? Are you familiar? All right. It's a nonprofit organization that is turning shoes and clothing into opportunities, providing relief, fighting poverty, and protecting the environment and empowering women. So they collect these things and recycle them and use them to help people. We've made a conscious effort to enhance our library collection for the students, both digital and print, to include environmental issues. The collection continues to grow with new titles about the impact of climate change, ocean pollution, excessive waste, and other topics. It also supports digital literacy and research practices that promote paperless learning. That's another positive outcome of the last few years. We're using a lot less paper in our school building. So we also, another thing we're doing, our students now carry water bottles, but they carry their own personal water bottle. It's not a plastic bottle. And
Sorry, just one more minute.
I'm sorry?
1 more minute.
1 minute, okay. I'm almost there, I'm sorry. Carla told me just try to get through it all. Yes, so the students are bringing their own bottles, and we have filling stations throughout the school. And we have a bio wall. So when the new building was built, this was something we did to help the neighborhood accept this new big building we were putting up. And the bio wall is growing, and it's very attractive. And that also helps with our air around the building. I think I'm almost done. Yes, bio wall is my last. We are also, I have to make sure I say this for the head of school. She told me to. So we are looking into solar energy possibilities at our school. So that's it. I just wanted to share with you. I think if you do an inventory wherever you are, you'll find that the roots are there, the beginnings are there, and just now we need to grow it. Thank you.
Let's have another round of applause for all our panelists. And if you could bear with us for just one moment, we're going to slightly shift the table over so that we can fit Bishop Burbidge and Dan, our keynote speaker, back up on the stage. Andy, maybe we can work with Nativity to design a slightly wider stage for future conferences so we can have the screen down with the table. I think we're just waiting for Bishop Burbidge to step back into the room. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with some of our questions for our presenters here this evening. This is a question for any presenter who would like to address it. What tips do you have for speaking about the importance of caring for our environment with skeptical Catholics?
No, you go.
Well, I would say putting a different framing on it is helpful. So for me, and in occasions where I've spoken about this with people who are skeptical, in particular the valence of Pope Francis's call to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor really resonates, because it's undeniable that a core part of our faith is service to those in need. And while there are differences of opinion within, Catholic theology in terms of what that looks like, to what extent is it the responsibility of public authorities, to what extent is it charitable donation, everyone wants to help those who are poor. And so really emphasizing how, when the climate changes, when deserts expand, farmers lose their livelihoods. It expands poverty. It forces people to migrate. That causes conflicts and wars across the world. That is something, and then as a driver of conflict, climate change as a driver of conflict is something that the Department of Defense is investing a lot of research into, and looking at how can we prevent future conflicts by at least mitigating the effects of climate change. And so thinking about it not just as sort of the traditional the earth for the earth's sake, which is convincing to some but maybe not to others, but thinking about what this looks like in terms of the fabric of our society.
I'll just repeat the question for Bishop. This is, what tips do you have for speaking about the importance of caring for our environment with skeptical Catholics?
How do you talk to skeptical Catholics about care for creation?
Yeah, I think in speaking to people who are skeptical, I think you have to do what we did a little bit tonight in our attempt to speak to the mind, right, to the intellect, and to the heart. I think if someone's skeptical and you're only trying to teach or to give facts, that may not be successful. If you only speak to the heart and seek emotion but don't give the facts, that may not be as helpful either. So I think in talking about the theme that unites us this evening, as we go forth to share the concerns and the necessary responses, I think use the model that you saw here tonight. Dan did a great job in presenting us with facts and intellectual formation that I know for myself I'm hearing for the first time. I think Megan certainly spoke beautifully to the heart about what we can do as families, and also practically of what people are really doing, whether it be in our high schools or whether it be in our parishes or home, to make a difference. So I think the only way you can have some sort of impact in speaking to skepticals is taking this broad approach.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is directed to Bishop, Dan, and Andy. How can I encourage my pastor and priests to support creation care work in my parish?
So I think, whenever we share our passion and the reason for it, that's contagious. That's contagious. And so all of you are here tonight because you are passionate, no doubt, about the common care for our home. And I think that is just having that conversation with your pastor and letting him see the passion, that it is contagious. And I think that's something very important in trying to say, and this is what we can do in our parish. And I'll try to give you a practical tip too in talking to pastors about how we can move the needle a little bit, is also following it up by saying, and here's how I can help you, right? Because so many times, so I'm just being really practical here. So many times our pastors, as you know, are extremely immersed in responding pastorally and spiritually to the care of God's people, that sometimes when they hear, you know, Father, we need to be doing this, Father, we need to be doing that, Father, we need to be doing that, it can be overwhelming. It's not that there's not a desire, but it can be overwhelming. But if you're saying, Father, here's why this is so important. If you give me the freedom, I can put together a group, a committee, a working group, or whatever to help. Let's go forward and let me help you. I think, practically speaking, you have a better chance of inspiring.
As you saw in my slides tonight, part of my goal tonight was to help you, folks who are probably pretty passionate about these issues, know that there is an office on the bishop's staff that does just this, that we do energy audits, that we do renewable energy, that we will fix up your older buildings and make them more efficient. And so if you go back to your parishes and your schools, and I do work for very busy pastors and very busy principals, they don't have time to slow down and understand the solar angle of their roof. We can do that for them. We have a lot of experts that can help make this a much harder or much easier process. And so OPCF, Office of Planning and Construction and Facilities, is kind of like an extension of your staff at the parish. And we want to be thought of that, because if you don't give me work, I lose my job. So it would be good if you called us, and if you just want help. And we don't charge for those kinds of things. We just want to help, really.
I'll just add two things. One, certainly agreeing with Bishop Burbidge that pastors are incredibly busy. So be friends with your pastor. Get to know your pastor on a personal level. That relationship was always going to help. Secondly is, don't just focus on that issue. Don't just focus on the climate issue. Get involved in the pro-life committee. Get involved in other issues that are coming up for your parish, and be seen as a person that can be relied on, so that when you do ask to do some work on the environment, you're known, you're appreciated, and I think all of those things will follow. The other thing that I will say, and I don't think we can emphasize this enough. If we want to keep and draw young people back to the church, we have to focus on environment. It's where they're the most passionate. And if they're not seeing it happening at the parish, they'll walk. Now, not all young people, of course, but a good majority of young people, in my experience, they're looking at their future and thinking, we're toast, literally and figuratively. And so let's do this for them. I think that would be my answer.
Our next question is for Linnell. Considering what we are learning about the science of climate and the universe, are curricula being used in Catholic schools, elementary and secondary, incorporating the newest scientific discoveries and the facts that Dan mentioned?
I can speak to the high school situation, and I would say yes. The curriculum is always being updated. The science is not static. It is changing all the time. It's a field of discovery. I'm so excited about the new space launches, for example. I know that was inspiring to me when I was in high school when Apollo started. And so now that I see Artemis starting, I think that will inspire young people. So yes, we do update our, we do a set of science courses for engineering that are called Project Lead the Way. And those include the latest technology and information for engineering. So yes, we're constantly reviewing and updating the curriculum, but always making sure that is also in keeping with the truth that the church teaches. So yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you. This next question is for Megan. And you can expand on this a little bit more. How can I help to educate my children about the effect of environmental damage on others and teach them that taking care of the earth is part of loving our neighbor and doing justice?
Well, I would say it's certainly something you can just talk with them about. But if you want a really good learning experience, hands-on is always best. So a Saturday trip to do a trash pickup. You know, if your known neighborhood is kept clean, go down a public trail, or even go to maybe a poorer area and some of the public parks there. And there is often plenty of pollution and trash to pick up. And so that, and then as they're doing that, you know, that they're learning, you know, hey, you know, my local playground is nice and well kept. You know, why is this other area not kept as well maintained by the local, you know, by the local authorities, as my 6-year-old know. But you know, you can talk with them about, and then they will see, and as they're doing it, they get curious, they ask questions, and so that would be one way. And then another is, you know, I just tell my kids stories about, you know, times where people have spoken out against this. There was a situation in Baltimore where they wanted to put a factory in downtown Baltimore that would dump toxic waste, and the fumes would go in the air, would pollute the air. People were getting sick, people were getting cancer, and they wanted to put a second facility in, and it was a young teenage girl who organized her neighborhood and said, you can't put this here. You need to put it somewhere else. Or don't do it at all. And she successfully organized her neighborhood and lobbied with the mayor and was able to block the construction of that facility. And so, you know, hearing about those stories and being able to relate them to your kids, and they go, wow, you know, good for her. Like they're inspired by that, but also you go, wow, why was that even a question in the first place? Why would they dump toxic waste near where people live? And that sort of starts the conversation.
Oh, go ahead.
I just want to add that we are all teachers in the sense that modeling for young people is so important that, you know, they see you doing these things and you're explaining why, but I think, you know, talk and learning facts is great, but they really need to see all of us modeling what we need to do.
Thank you. Our next question is for Andy or Bishop, or both. Is the Arlington Diocese working to add EV charging to their properties and switching their vehicles to electric?
Go ahead, Andy. We haven't talked about vehicles, right? Yeah. No, it's, we have not made any decision or even explored that at that point, but certainly attending a conference like this, I hope we all come away with challenges, both for our personal lives, but also for the institutions we represent. So I embrace that more as a challenge than anything.
Great, thank you. And then our final question is for Andy or Dan. What have you found to be the biggest obstacle to getting solar into the diocese, parishes, and schools?
Money. Money. Dan mentioned in his speech that solar is becoming much more competitive, and it is. And the state of Virginia is making solar much more friendly for a lot of applications. But still, we're talking about a lot of money to buy and install these systems. What we're benefiting from in the diocese is big institutional investors who want their money in a green fund. They want their money applied toward a green project. And that's who's funding much of the millions of dollars in solar that we're planning on. And then education. Like busy pastors, busy principals really don't have the time to talk to this guy from the construction office about a solar project. They just don't get it. Well, our developers, Catholic Energies and others, are now bringing numbers to the table that are pretty attractive. Like, it will be equal to or less than what you're paying now. Why don't you do this? And those numbers are really helping. The cost is much more affordable. And so that, and I'll leave it there unless you want to add anything.
Yeah, just I would say time and money. You know, pastors, principals, other executives who are the decision makers for these properties. They don't know how to begin with solar. I mean, you know, it's very complicated. It seems simple. You just slap some panels on the roof, but you have to make sure you're connected to the grid. You have to get it paid for. You have to make sure your roof is okay to handle solar panels. There's contracts, there's permits, there's all kinds of things. And no pastor, no principal that I know of is willing to go through all of that. So what Catholic Energies does, and there's others, it's not just our organization, but to develop those projects, to be the advocate for the Catholic institution, to make sure that they're getting a good deal, they get quality panels, they get quality workmanship, and we find the financing, which is one thing that Andy talked about. You know, there are investors that want to do this, so let's get their money and deploy that for the solar projects. But it's time and money, and I think those are the two big obstacles.
Thank you all so much for your time and knowledge. Let's give our presenters a round of applause.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. That's very good. Very great presentation. Yeah, very well done. Well done. Thank you, Megan.
Well, thank you so much, Andy and Dan and our Bishop Michael and Linnell and Megan for being part of the conference tonight and the sharing of everyone. I think we've all been enriched. And thank you, Bishop, for providing the leadership and the vision for our diocese to implement this 7-year plan and take the Pope's encyclical and really seriously try to live it in our lives. So filled with a lot of hope. And I know for me, when I was born, the earth was a lot healthier than it is now. And I kind of feel like I want to be part of leaving the earth healthier than it is now for the future generations, for our grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren. And I keep hearing that what we do in the next 15 to 20 years is going to be crucial, just crucial, to their being able to inhabit the earth and the planet safely. So I always think of Father Jerry Creedon at a conference like this because he chaired our Peace and Justice Commission for over 20 years. And at the end of a conference, he would also say, so what are we going to do about it? You know, and so I'm happy to announce that each of us can do our part by making a personal commitment to pray, to learn, to act, to help preserve our God-given home for our children and grandchildren by making personal pledges through our diocesan personal pledge page that's been set up. So on the pledge page, you'll see options to participate by praying, learning about church teaching, acting to protect our planet. These are ideas that we can commit ourselves to as individuals, families, parishes, and like to use less plastic, to use less water, to do temperature control. And here's how you can pledge on the pledge page. If you're joining live stream, there is a link on your live stream page that will take you to the page. If you're here in person, there are 2 ways to get there. There's the QR code in your program that you can use with your phone, or you can go to the diocesan YouTube page to access the link. And we'll be sharing what all the pledges, we'll just keep accumulating these pledges over the next 7 years. And you'll be able to have access to them through the diocesan webpage and through the Peace and Justice webpage that you can sign up for and link. So thanks to all. Thanks for everyone for coming tonight. I think it was a beautiful evening. I'm grateful to our caterers, Boyd and Parker, Sylvia Tanner. They tried to use very good reusable plates and glasses. Thank you so much. These pumpkins are from Sylvia Tanner's pumpkin farm, and that are beginning to harvest. And so the person whose birthday is closest to today, you can take your pumpkin home with you from the centerpiece. Okay. Thanks again, Bishop. I want to invite you now to close our conference and send us forth with a blessing.
And thank you to Father Bob and everyone here at Nativity for their gracious welcome and leadership in putting this conference together. Thank you. Do you all have the prayer at your table? A prayer for our earth? Yes. Great. Let's say that together, everyone. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. And dear friends, may Almighty God bless you and all those you love and keep you safe in your travels home this evening. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life.